across 4 states, Democrats making history, the Trump effect helping out Republicans in some key races. Brand new hour of America's Newsroom. I'm Bill Hemmer. Nice to see you, Julie.
Yeah, we are ready to go. Hour 2. Yes. I'm Julie Banderas in for Sandra Smith. Let's talk the primaries.
Shall we?
But first, President Trump has been congratulating all the Republican victors this morning. And first, we begin with Wisconsin Governor Scott Walker, easily winning the chance to seek a 3rd term. Peter Ducey is reporting live from Milwaukee. Hey, Peter.
And Julie, Democrats decided last night they think their best chance to unseat Walker in Madison is with the state's school superintendent. His name is Tony Evers. He's an outspoken opponent of the laws limiting unions that Walker has signed. Evers already told the Milwaukee Journal-Sentinel that we're going to win because we're going to hold Scott Walker accountable for his reign of terror. But Walker has a warning that, quote, the choice is simple. Do we take a giant step backwards and watch more of our graduates flee the state to pursue their careers, or do we continue to move forward as we keep Wisconsin working for generations to come? Democrats here also nominated Randy the Iron Stash Bryce to try and flip the seat long held by Speaker Paul Ryan. He's going to face Ryan's former staffer who won on the Republican side of the ticket, Brian Stile. Next door in Minnesota last night, Tim Pawlenty lost his gubernatorial primary. He's a Republican whose name was once floated as a potential running mate for Mitt Romney, and he was defeated by a county commissioner named Jeff Johnson. And a major liability down the stretch for Pawlenty was criticism that he made back in 2016 that he thought then candidate Trump was unfit for office. Minnesota's Democratic primary voters, though, still sent Congressman Keith Ellison to the ballot for Attorney General just days after serious domestic abuse allegations that he denies surfaced on Facebook. And in Vermont last night, history as Christine Hallquist became the first openly transgender candidate to win a major party's nominee for governor. She is going to face Vermont's incumbent governor, Phil Smith, a Republican, in the fall. Julie.
All right, Peter Ducey, thank you so much.
I want to bring in America's A-Team, Chris Bedford, editor-in-chief, Daily Caller News Foundation. Nice to see you, sir. Richard Fowler, Fox News contributor. You do more than that, though, don't you? Oh, I will rip you off. And that's Noah Rothman, Associate Editor, Commentary Magazine. Noah, welcome back. Nice to see you.
Appreciate it.
What do you think?
About last night?
Yeah.
It was interesting. I mean, there's a couple things that are obviously really new on the American political landscape. We've got the first openly transgender candidate, or probably ever transgender candidate, running for governor of Vermont. Somebody who actually voted for the Republican he or she is running against in the last election. And some things that are weird that haven't changed at all. You would have thought that with the Me Too movement, there would have been more movement against Keith Ellison, who was accused of abuse just a few days before the primary. And you saw the DNC didn't come out at all or say anything until last night. They were very quiet. They were silent for 72 hours. So not that much has changed broadly. And either way, it's going to be an exciting election.
That story still follows Ellison, but he was a winner last night.
He was a winner last night. Good for the Republican
That story
Party,
came out
probably.
very late. I mean, it was literally the day before. I don't know if voters had time to digest that.
I agree. And certainly the DNC, they had 72 hours to think about it, and they decided to stay quiet.
Here is the tweet from the West Wing. I should say Bedminster, New Jersey. Great Republican election results last night. So far, we have the team we want. 8 for 9 in special elections. Red wave, Richard. It's rolling your way.
Oh, boy. I'm going to drown in it. I think that this was an interesting night. The race that I thought was the most interesting was the Tim Pawlenty, Jeff Johnson race in Minnesota, and here's why. So Jeff Johnson was very popular amongst Republicans and amongst Trump backers, but the problem that Jeff Johnson's going to have as we get into the general election is, can he beat a Democrat who's the Democratic nominee for governor? This is part of the Trump problem. He engages in these primaries. He picks candidates to the farther right that are going to have big problems in the general election, and we're seeing it here again.
But he was the winner with this Chris Kobach.
Yes, but Chris Kobach also, in a recent poll from that state, shows that against the Democrat, Chris Kobach is down almost 13 points. So once again, when you engage in primary elections, this is the impact.
All right.
Yeah, it's a competitive race in Kansas. It's probably now too much of a reach for Republicans in Minnesota because the president has endorsed explicitly people who he says flatter him or who share his sensibilities. One of the issues in Minnesota, very explicitly, was the candidate, the now nominee for governor, the Republican nominee for governor, attacked Tim Pawlenty for making hash of the Access Hollywood tape for saying, I'm going to back away from Donald Trump in October of 2016 because he explicitly bragged about sexual assault. It's not the first time this has happened. Alabama, this was also an issue for Martha Roby, who managed to defeat her formerly Democratic opponent. That was just too much of a reach for Democrats in Alabama. But we see time and time again that it is a display of fealty to Donald Trump, that Donald Trump values more than electability. And that could cost in Kansas. Certainly will cost.
I'll just put one more point on that. I think the Wall Street Journal headline had it right. Outsiders continue to impress on both sides right now, so that trend continues.
Yeah.
What about Bernie Sanders last night?
And it's interesting. He's not running yet for anything, right? But maybe for president, because he always inserts himself when it comes to any election. But he was on Stephen Colbert, and once again pushing socialists. Here he is on Stephen Colbert. Take a listen.
I've been all over Trump country, and I think what Trump was able to do is pick up on the failures of the Democratic Party that did not talk about the fact that hardworking, decent people saw their jobs going to Mexico or China.
Only half the people you campaigned for won their primaries so far, so maybe there's a little taint to socialism that turns people off.
I don't really think so. I think the real issue is that the ideas that we have been talking about, almost without exception, Stephen, are now ideas that are mainstream ideas that are supported by the vast majority of the American people.
Socialism, mainstream ideas? What?
I wouldn't say socialism or mainstream ideas. I would say this. I think Bernie Sanders appeals to maybe a third or less than a third of the Democratic Party. But remember, Donald Trump appeals to about 40% of the American people. So you're dealing with somebody who I think is at the far end of the party, but he does do one thing for the Democratic Party. He energizes them. And we saw that yesterday. If you look at all the primary races that we had, Democratic turnout overwhelmed Republican turnout. In Minnesota, Democrats turned out over 200,000 more voters than Republicans. And in Connecticut, almost 70,000 more voters. In Wisconsin, almost 81,000 more voters. In all of these primary races, Democrats are turning out and they're voting. And if Bernie talking about socialism helps,
it's an interesting point. It's something to watch.
Yeah.
Chris, when you go back to the clips last night from Colbert, you get the sense that that Democrats, those on the left, are worried about those who are too far on the left. And I think that's the root of the question that was given to Sanders last night.
I think so, and it's also some of the words they use, because socialism does have a taint in world history, in American history. People don't really like it. It's not a very American idea, but a lot of the ideas, to Senator Sanders' point, that have been pushed by the Democratic Party, by President Barack Obama, that have been embraced, including Obamacare, really do lean more toward that socialist bent. The Democratic Party of today is significantly further to the left than just 10 years ago, 20 years ago, especially 30 years ago. President Bill Clinton could not win a primary today. So he's got a point that, while the word socialism may not be a good campaign slogan, it's certainly winning in the Democratic Party.
Noah?
Yeah, I generally agree with that. You know, it was only 20 years ago that Bill Clinton praised the triumph of Western capitalism and freedom over socialism, that Tony Blair drove a stake through the heart of the labor constitution that advocated nationalization of industry. That sort of thing is anathema now. You have a labor leader in Britain who wants to renationalize the railways as though it's 1980 for some reason. And we have, I mean, say what you will about Medicare for all, single player, what have you. It is the nationalization of the health insurance industry. You can say that free education, for example, and a federal jobs guarantee might be popular, but you can also find them in the 1977 Soviet Constitution, and they are what they are.
Listen, this argument that the Democratic Party is moving to the left only exists in a world that the Republican Party is also moving to the right. Remember, just a couple years ago, Republicans were willing to endorse some sort of immigration reform. Now, Republicans won't touch it with an 80-foot pole.
Yeah. Some
Just
Democrats
80?
won't even.
You guys stand by, okay? We want to get to this guest in New Mexico. There's a story that's been brewing out there, and local leaders there now up in arms after a judge grants bail to 5 extremist Muslims accused of abusing children and training them to become school shooters. That judge, Sarah Backus, is now receiving death threats, and apparently it's not the first time this judge has issued low bonds to violent offenders. Local leaders are not happy about this. Here's one of them, Ryan Cangialosi, New Mexico Republican Party chairman. And sir, thank you for your time. What is the issue you have with the judge's ruling when she says she was just following guidelines in this case?
Well, Bill, thank you for the time this morning to discuss this. We have a very serious case where we have individuals that have a camp where a dead little boy was found. You have children who are malnourished. It's like a third world country. You have them being trained to go into schools and to harm other individuals and to kill students. And we have a judge who has allowed them to be released, and it just makes no sense. And it's something that we're dealing with here in New Mexico. It's this pretrial release system that our New Mexico Supreme Court has put into place, which has allowed criminals out. Just recently, there was a man who was released who got high on meth and beat a 1-year-old little girl, and they had to put her into an induced coma to save her life. There's another circumstance here in New Mexico where liberal judges have released individuals out, and one was a lady who just was involved in a drive-by shooting and then threw a party where a 21-year-old girl was murdered. And so we have to allow our give resources to all of our law enforcement. But once they put these people behind bars, we need to keep them there. Of course, they have every right for a trial, but we need to make sure our communities are safe, our children are safe by keeping them behind bars.
Here's the judge who appointed to the bench 7 years ago, 2011, by the current governor, Susana Martinez, a Republican, elected the post 2012 as a Democrat, so that was a year later, expected to remain there at least another 2 years in 2020. Here is her comment, in part, in court. She said, "What I've heard here today is troubling, definitely. Troubling facts about numerous children in far from ideal circumstances and individuals who are living in a very unconventional way." Listening to your answer, you've got a beef with the law. Is the judge wrong or is the law wrong, fundamentally?
Well, we have a situation where we have these pretrial rules in place by the New Mexico Supreme Court that I do have issues with. When you have individuals training young children how to go into schools and shoot them up, we know that that is the case. We have a dead little boy, which is so incredibly sad, found on this compound. I think that the judge should have had the wherewithal to say, no, we need to keep these people behind bars until more investigation could happen.
Yeah, I understand one has been turned over to immigration authorities, one is being held by the feds. What about the other 3 adults? Where are they today?
You know, I don't even know where they're at today, and that's what's very disconcerting.
Were they released? Did they meet bond?
I believe so. I'm not exactly sure if they have, but even having that opportunity to get out is very disconcerting.
What do you think was happening at this compound?
Well, we know that you have malnourished children. You have a situation where a child was brought over from another state because they were thinking that that young child was demon-possessed and they wanted to do an exorcism. And I've heard that they had said that he was going to be reincarnated and come back and give instructions on where to go kill, which in my estimation is very, very disconcerting when we have school shootings happening here in New Mexico recently and throughout the country. And if we have situations where we have adults training young children how to go into schools and shoot other students, I think that we need to really pause, take time, do an investigation, but keep those that have the potential to harm others behind bars until they have the opportunity to have their trial.
Concerning at a minimum. Ryan Cangelosi, thank you for your time, sir. Out of Albuquerque,
thank you so much.
Out of Albuquerque, New Mexico, thank you. Julie,
all right.
what's next?
Back to the Trump campaign, officially taking action against Omarosa. Later this hour, we're going to be speaking to former Trump deputy campaign manager David Bossie. He is our headliner today. And dramatic rescue still underway in Italy. Amid new fears, the part of the collapsed bridge that's still standing could still come crashing down.
Also, Americans apparently open up their wallets, willing to spend big time. What it tells us about America's economic future and the economic strength today. Charles Payne's going to break that down. Coming up.
Do you?
A grim rescue and recovery operation underway right now in Italy as search teams pull more bodies from the wreckage of yesterday's highway bridge collapse. And while investigators search for a cause, politicians are looking for who is to blame. Senior foreign affairs correspondent Amy Kellogg joins us live from Milan. Hi, Amy.
Hi, Julie. Well, for example, the Five Star Movement, which is one of the protest parties that is part of Italy's new government, had a posting on its website 5 years ago in which it called the prospect of the Morandi Bridge collapsing, Julie, a fairy tale. And this was in the context of the debate over how critical was the need to upgrade Italy's infrastructure. They have since removed that post, which is now very embarrassing for them. And then there is a lot of sniping and speculation amongst political groups, predictably now, about who is to blame. This, as the work continues, the search for possible victims or survivors trapped in the rubble, but no more voices are being heard from underneath. The death toll is now at 39, with 16 injured. It is quite frankly a miracle that anyone survived. One man has spoken of falling 90 feet in his car and getting out unscathed. But there are not many stories like that. Firefighters worked through the night, and people are still missing, while others are getting the grim news of their loss at area hospitals.
I started to call him 40 times, 50 times, and then I started also to call his friend who was together with his wife. All three of them Chileans. And then I came to the hospital and they said he was no more.
And Julie, we just heard from another man from Novara who assumes that his brother, sister-in-law, and their daughter have been killed. They were on their way to Elba Island for Ferragosto, which is today. It's the big Italian summer holiday, and doing the math, looking at the trajectory of their journey and the timing of everything, he just figured that they must have been on that bridge when it collapsed. Of course, he can't reach them, so he has traveled to Genoa to try to get some news, but so far nothing. So that's just another human story representing the many levels of tragedy and grief that are going on right now.
Sad.
Julie.
All right, Amy Kellogg,
Remarkable span, too, a bridge there. Okay, 20 past the hour, rolling. This U.S. economy is like a hurricane, isn't it, huh? Being it's a Cat 3 or a Cat 5. What is it? Charles Payne is here to talk about Americans boosting their spending. Consumers shelled out more than $500 billion making money on the Fox Business Network. There he is. He's Charles Payne. That's just for July?
That was for July, and that number is twice as much, more than twice as much as Wall Street was looking for. In fact, they were looking for 0.2%. Huge, huge number. You know, we talk about surveys all the time, right? The consumer sentiment number, the consumer confidence number. This is the ultimate survey, what we actually do with our wallets and pocketbooks. And as I delved into the numbers, it's even more impressive because department stores grew faster than the internet last month. I mean, remember, we've been talking about the death of malls.
Department stores grew faster than the internet.
That's shocking.
Yes,
I'm very surprised to hear that.
Now, maybe it's a lower base and all that kind of stuff, but it grew faster.
Yeah.
But what does this tell you? By the way, the fastest growth, restaurants.
Wow.
So that's when you know families feel better, when you, okay, you know what? We can go out for dinner tonight.
Yeah.
Surging growth. So people are going out for dinner. They're going
buying
out to
cars.
the malls. You know, they're doing all of this sort of stuff, and it's really absolutely remarkable. Consumer spending is 2/3 of our economy. This number is huge, and even before this number came out yesterday, the National Retail Federation raised their estimates for consumer spending this year. So this is absolutely phenomenal. If we're going to have 3% GDP growth, this is how we get to it.
Great. Good news,
Yeah,
right?
it's phenomenal.
You know, we're looking at this turkey thing. The markets are selling off. They were down about 200 about an hour ago. I don't know what they're doing right now. We can put the board up in a moment here. You don't think turkey's a big deal?
Turkey's not a big deal, and that's not why we're down today.
What is this?
You know what? This is China. And you know what? We are winning this so-called trade battle with China, but we don't, listen, we're not rooting. I'm not rooting for China to get hammered or destroyed or crushed. They've got some issues now that have existed for a long time, but they're bubbling to the surface. There's a company over there called Tencent. It goes back and forth that Alibaba is the most valuable tech companies in all of Asia.
Alibaba's like Amazon.
Right.
Tencent is like video
social
games.
media, video games. It's a combination of both. You've been
compulsive shopper.
First time that their revenues declined since 2015. The stock is getting hammered. It's down 29% this year, and that's sending shockwaves because we saw some economic data yesterday in China that was the worst in 20 years. We're seeing more and more signs that they have some serious problems. And keep in mind what the Trump administration is trying to achieve is they really want to also slow down what's called Made in China 2025, which is their great goal of dominating the world through technology, which is why they are so resistant to stop stealing from us. Well, their exchange, where all the big Chinese tech companies trade on, is called Shenzhen. In fact, if you ever Google Shenzhen, it will blow your mind. It's an amazing city. That exchange is down 53% since 2015. Right. So there's there are plus and negatives. The plus side of this is you hope maybe all of these economic woes will bring them to the table and we'll get a fair deal sooner rather than later. But also, maybe it also reflects a desperation. Can they make it to 2025 without stealing? I don't know.
That's all about intellectual property. Just
Right.
in conclusion, then, so you think the Trump team has a fighting chance on this because of the squeeze effect that's happening right now throughout China?
China has what they call a command economy, and they push buttons and they create things, whether it's through printing money or bank loans or subsidizing money-losing industries. Sometimes you start to push those buttons and nothing happens.
Right.
They've got to be panicking over there, and we'll see how it plays out. But I think this is another sign that they should come to the table because their economy is getting hammered,
Right.
and they will lose this more. They will suffer more damage. There's going to be collateral damage, we know that, but they will suffer significantly more than America.
Right.
The red flags are there, and that's why our market is down today too. We don't want China to crumble. We don't want their economy to crumble. We just want fair access to it.
You know, this is something that the president campaigned on, is talk tough and tough on trade on China, and he's following through. You know, the talks of a potential trade war. Those talks alone are having a huge impact on our economy.
They are having a huge impact in retaliatory tariffs and reactions to these kind of things. So we're already seeing the impact. But again, and we know there's going to be collateral damage, and we know that they're specifically targeting areas of our economy to put political pressure on President Trump. But what we're seeing in China is that they've had some economic issues that were hidden, like this debt crisis and the credit crisis. Now they're being exposed. Wall Street doesn't want to see China crumble. No one wants to see that. I don't think President Trump wants to see that. We want to sell them cars. We want to sell them coffee makers. We want to sell them American-made products. Open up your economy the way we've opened ours up.
Very interesting. And Turkey's just a little drop out there, right? That's
Yeah,
what
it's
you're
a
saying?
little drop. I'm sorry for Erdogan,
It's okay.
who, when he said boycott. Here's the thing. Erdogan
products.
told the Turkish folks out there, turn in your dollars and take the lira. They're like, no, thank
No,
you.
thank you. They're not worth much.
Thank you, buddy. Nice
See you,
to see
man.
you.
All right,
See you
good
guys
to see you,
later.
The
Charles.
hurricane.
Chris Kobach celebrating a Trump bump this morning after Kansas Governor Phil Collier concedes the primary following a very narrow, hotly contested election. Kobach joins us next hour.
Also, the Trump campaign taking legal action against Omarosa Manigault-Newman. Live perspective in a moment here. From our headliner, former Trump deputy campaign manager David Bossie, this is the White House, defends the president's tweets about his former aide turned adversary.
I think the president is certainly voicing his frustration with the fact that this person has shown a complete lack of integrity, particularly by the actions following her time here at the White House.
Campaign filing a formal complaint against Omarosa Manigault-Newman, accusing the former White House aide of breaking a non-disclosure agreement. Want to bring in today's headliner, David Bossie, former Trump deputy campaign manager, co-author of Let Trump Be Trump, and a Fox News contributor. David, it's been some time. Welcome back. It's good to have you as our headliner.
Been on vacation, so today's my first day back.
Thank you. Back into the fire we go. Did you have to sign an NDA at the White House?
Well, Bill, I never worked at the White House, so I did not.
Then what about on the campaign? Did you have to?
At the campaign, it was a standard practice. I think that's pretty standard across the board, whether you're working for Donald Trump for president or most campaigns across the country at all levels.
Okay, so Omarosa apparently signed one. She acknowledged that.
Yeah,
and then
absolutely.
I think she said when she was leaving the White House, they offered her $15,000 a month to stay, but she had to sign another non-disclosure deal. I believe she rejected that non-disclosure. But I guess the point goes to this. If you believe the non-disclosure is in effect legally, why not pursue that before the book comes out and all the media interviews we've watched this week?
Well, first of all, I don't think no one knows what's in the book until it comes out. I still have not seen the book myself. I don't plan on reading it. I'm definitely not buying it, but I can tell you that you don't want to create a problem that if it doesn't exist, meaning why go after her if you don't know the extent of what's covered in the book. Maybe it doesn't violate the NDA, maybe it does, and I think that that's the reason that you have to wait until the book comes out to see what's in it.
Yeah, now the question is, A, whether that non-disclosure agreement is binding, and number two, and I think Omarosa does have the upper hand here when it comes to proving that or not. The other is, The reason why this non-disclosure they claim, the Trump campaign claims, was violated is because she is accusing the president of the United States of using the N-word. That would essentially be what triggered this whole thing.
Well, first of all, that's just an outrageous accusation with no evidence, no proof, except for her rumor and innuendo. It is unfair to this president. He is an incredible man. I've met him through non-political means, and he's always been an incredibly warm and generous person. I've never seen that side of him, and everybody that I talk to, no one has ever seen that side of Donald Trump, and only until now, when it becomes politically expedient to sell a book, does she try to say this. And it's just part of the problem with our politics today, and it's unfortunate that Omarosa has just really committed, in my opinion, treason against the man who really created her, and it's just unfortunate that we're seeing this type of backstabbing.
Let's just get back to her in the Situation Room, recording her firing and then recording the president on that phone call. I mean, she didn't break any laws, but she certainly, it would seem, you know, is definitely on a line here. Where do you draw the line when it comes to former White House employees doing these sorts of things? It's a national security breach in many minds.
This is an outrageous violation of our national security. Whether I want to know the answers to several questions. One is, was it a government phone? Was it a private phone? Was it her personal phone or some other device that was used to record these things in the Situation Room? So did she deceive and did she violate our national security policies, procedures, and or laws by then disclosing them? So I think that's a very important question. And I think
Go ahead, finish your point.
And I think that Congress, this is really an important point here. Congress can call her to testify about these very issues, and I think that Congress needs to very seriously consider bringing her forward and making her answer questions under oath about what she did, how she did it, because foreign actors could be at play here, meaning trying to listen to whatever device she brought into the White House surreptitiously. So there could be a violation that she doesn't even understand or know about when she was doing this.
She appeared to be pretty proud to be working on the campaign, coming across with a number of events and several interviews. What was she like around you?
Well, I could tell you, I was around Omarosa during the campaign a little bit, but she had a personality that was such that she was a bully to the staff, low-level and mid-level staff. She would always throw out that she would tell Mr. Trump if you didn't do what she wanted, that she would go to Mr. Trump. She would always use that ace in the hole, if you will, to play against staff every time to get her way. And I didn't work with her in the White House, so I have no idea. But she is the person that I saw on The Apprentice 12, 15 years ago. And always playing that game, and it just wasn't something that I was very interested in participating in.
There's a big trial going on. I'm sure you've heard of it. Paul Manafort, closing arguments happened today. Here's Kevin Downing leaving court yesterday, the attorney for Manafort. He said this.
Mr. Manafort just rested his case, and he did so because he and his legal team believe that the government has not met its burden of proof. Thanks, everyone.
He went on, and there was a few comments that trailed after there were reporters. Do you think Bob Mueller is waiting on a verdict in the Manafort matter before he continues or not?
Well, it's getting very late in the game for Mr. Mueller. This seems to be his biggest case to date. It's really his only major trial to date. After 2 years and $25 million, we have a case that has nothing to do with Donald Trump. This case, Donald Trump's name was barely mentioned. The campaign was not talked about. The inaugural, the White House, nothing to do with Donald Trump at all. This was about a person who evaded the law and evaded paying his taxes 10, 12, 15 years ago of tens of millions of dollars that had nothing to do with Donald Trump. And that's why a lot of us in this town want to see this verdict come or go, but it just doesn't have anything to do with President Trump or our campaign.
It'll be interesting to see how the Peter Strzok firing also boils down. But I mean, Mueller wanted to have this thing wrapped up by September. They ultimately wanted to have this wrapped up before the midterms. What happens if they don't wrap this up in time? If they have no proof that there was collusion or obstruction of justice, then do you just wrap up the case, or do you cost the Republicans or the Democrats for that matter?
Yeah, I think that Bob Mueller has to seriously be thinking about wrapping this up. He has to wrap this up for the good of this country. We have to get what happened with Russia, and we all now know and understand and take very seriously what Russia did to the Clinton campaign, to the Trump campaign, and to many state campaigns across this country in the 2016 campaign. We have to pay attention to it in the elections coming up. But it didn't have anything to do with collusion of the Trump campaign, and there's no evidence of it. It never happened. This president won fair and square. Hillary Clinton is the one who cannot accept the results. And that's what this is about. So the mainstream media wants to, look, the mainstream media and the left hate this president more than they love this country. And they are doing serious damage to this country, getting us astray from what we should be doing and focusing on making all Americans' lives better.
Let's see what happens inside that courtroom in Alexandria. Sir, thank you so much, David Bossie, for being our headliner. Hope you come back, all right? And welcome back from vacation.
Yeah,
Thank you, sir.
great talking to you. Outrage in New Mexico after a judge grants bail to the 5 Muslim extremists accused of training captive children to carry out school shootings. And now that judge is getting death threats. Alicia Cunha is in New Mexico with the latest. Hey, Alicia.
Hi, Julia. The Taos County Courthouse is back open this morning. The Sheriff's Department issuing a statement last night explaining why it locked down the courthouse, quote, saying it was due to the unprecedented number of death threats and threats of violence being received by various court personnel. State District Judge Sarah Backus came under attack on social media, local talk radio, and by New Mexico state leaders after she agreed to an unsecured bond for the 5 suspects accused of child abuse at their compound in the northern New Mexico desert. Investigators testified they found 11 children in deplorable conditions with little to no food and a cache of weapons, which prosecutors say the adults were using to train the kids to kill police, teachers, and students. They also found the remains of a young boy. Authorities are still awaiting results on whether they are that of Abdul Ghani Wahaj. The 3-year-old went missing from his home in Georgia, and his father, Siraj Wahaj, is suspected of abducting him. The older Wahaj will not be released with the others because of an outstanding warrant from that state. Also not being released, 35-year-old Janie LaVille. The sheriff says she has been transferred to U.S. Citizenship and Immigration Services. The mother of 6 of the children is from Haiti. A reform to the pretrial system here allowed Judge Backus to clear the way for these defendants to await trial while on house arrest with ankle monitors. These efforts meant to protect those without the cash to sign for a bond with the threat of a fine if they don't show up for court. Judge Backus defended her decision, saying the prosecution failed to prove that there was a violent plan in the works. And Julie, right now, the detention center folks here tell us that no one has actually been released. So we're still waiting to see if, in fact, that does happen.
All right, we'll watch it. Alicia Cunha, thank you.
In the meantime, a stunning new report on ISIS fighters overseas. Now, why we are now learning about 30,000 ISIS terrorists active in a place where we thought their numbers were severely diminished. So what's the truth here? What's the threat at home and what's the threat abroad? We'll dig into that story coming up next.
A disturbing new report showing ISIS remains a serious threat. The U.S. Defense Department saying about 30,000 ISIS fighters are still active in Iraq and Syria. Mary Kissel is a member of the Wall Street Journal editorial board and a Fox News contributor. What is going on when ISIS numbers have been going down and then we get a number like this? Should we be alarmed?
Well, ISIS numbers are going down in the areas where the United States troops are present east of the Euphrates River in Syria. But remember, Julie, that's the only place where U.S. troops are. And so in places that are where Bashar al-Assad controls or Russia and Iranian forces are present, they're still there. And I think one of the mistakes of the administration has been to treat the fight against ISIS as a discrete problem, but it's not. You can't fight ISIS without addressing Assad in Syria because that's why you still have jihadism in Syria, to fight Assad. You can't address ISIS without looking at the strength of the Iraqi government and that coalition.
But in the bigger picture, we were led to believe that they were down to a couple hundred fighters, perhaps, maybe a couple thousand, but the numbers have been diminished. This report suggests it's much more significant than we thought. I think the numbers vary, but the bottom line here is that this threat is not dead and gone.
No, and in fact,
James Mattis says there's hard fighting ahead. That's all there is to it.
Yeah, and it's in a much wider geographic area than it was 5 years ago, Bill, too. You're talking about ISIS present in Afghanistan, at least 1,000 fighters there. They're in the Philippines. You'll recall that siege on a small island just within the last year. They're in Indonesia. They're in Africa. So it is a diverse threat. Now, the president deserves credit for taking down the caliphate with the help of Iraqi fighters and our coalition allies in Syria.
Which could have been done 4 years ago, too, you would
Correct.
admit.
It could have been done 4 years ago. But the problem is, again, why is ISIS and al-Qaeda present in Syria? It's because those anti-Assad, pro-democracy Sunni fighters who wanted to ally with the United States were abandoned by us. And so the only people who were going to fight Assad were the jihadis. And so a lot of those fighters are now with ISIS and al-Qaeda.
You know, when you talk about terror and you talk about ISIS and the Taliban, they are like tentacles. They have tentacles. So you talked about Bashar al-Assad. There's also Pakistani's prime minister. They are fueling this fire. You need to go to the top. You don't just go after the terrorists. I mean, what are we doing in order to intervene somehow and to get to these leaders?
Well, look, I think the president has conflicting instincts, because he does want to withdraw America from foreign entanglements. But as you saw in Afghanistan, some places we just have to be present. And unfortunately, if we're not there, they would devolve back into another safe haven for terror. Now, you mentioned Pakistan. The incoming Prime Minister, Imran Khan, is a Taliban apologist. And that's a problem for the United States. And I think Afghanistan is a theater that the White House is going to have to focus a lot more attention on in the coming weeks.
It's been a violent week in Afghanistan.
It certainly
headed up by
has.
the offensive of the Taliban in so many different areas, something to watch. Hang on to this comment. James Mattis, Mad Dog, there's hard fighting ahead. That's all there is to it.
We need a strategy, Bill. A bigger strategy.
We'll see when that happens.
Not just killing ISIS. Has to be a larger
Thank you, Mary.
strategy.
See you real soon. Mary Kissel
Thanks,
from the Wall
Bill.
Street Journal. Thank
All right, to
you.
be with you.
There's a new warning out to banks from the FBI what an impending cyber heist could mean for ATMs and maybe even your bank account. It doesn't
What's
sound
that
cool.
all about? I don't like that. Plus, lunch ladies stealing kids' lunch money? Nearly $500,000 worth? What's up with that? The 24/7 crew is here next.
Bad boys, what you gonna do? What you gonna do when they come for you? Bad boys, what you gonna do? What you gonna...
Hi, I'm Ty Young. What if